my healing came through sitting at the edge of the water in Clearwater Beach, actually. I spent years there where I wrote. And
you're watching the Spotlight Network, starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're featuring Pamela Benner and her powerful memoir, To Touch One Heart. It is a story of trauma, trials, and triumphs, told through the unforgettable metaphor of life as a tapestry. From the tangled underside of suffering to the revealed beauty of healing, Pamela invites readers to see how every thread, joy and sorrow, can hold purpose. It is raw, faith-forward, and deeply reflective, reminding us that redemption can be woven even from the hardest chapters in life. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her amazing book. The links are below this interview. Pamela, thank you so much for joining me here today.
thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about the inspiration, the why, why you decided to write this book.
Well, for years I have written a few things, and I wanted to eventually write my story, but it took me a while before I decided to do that because I didn't really want to put myself out there completely. Once I decided to actually do it, I was very happy to. Actually, it helped me to make connections of my present and with my past. It brought things full circle. And it was just something I felt I could help other people to identify with and actually seek their own healing, that it actually came from within me. It wasn't anything that I was actually running after, because a lot of years I spent running away from myself, and I decided I was going to face myself and look deep within.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you did, because I think other people can learn from your life story as well. There are a lot of commonalities, of course. What do you feel were the biggest trials and the biggest triumphs of your life?
I would say that the forgiveness part was the hardest, because I had to forgive everyone, including myself, and forgiving myself was probably the hardest because I was always hard on myself through the years. And I would say the triumph was actually in writing the book and actually completing the book and going through those situations for the last time, in terms of making my peace with those people and situations, and even with myself. It was like an ongoing thing. Sometimes you don't always realize how deep those hurts are until you start uncovering them. So I think that was more of a challenge for me, to uncover the things that I really would rather have left alone.
Yeah. What was it like putting it down on paper? You're forced to focus on some things that are unpleasant again.
Yeah.
I mean, the passing of your parents, for example, that is always a tough time in a person's life. What was it like revisiting those chapters of your life that you might have tucked away a little bit?
Yeah, especially with my parents passing, because I was their caregiver for a good 10 years before they actually passed. They helped me through my divorce of 10 years of a struggle. So in reality, I helped them in their transition of life. And actually, it was a blessing. I never entered back into their home after 20 years, thinking that they were going to be the tool that was used to bring forth my healing, as well as their own healing. I never imagined that. So that was truly remarkable. And that is the end of the story, in terms of how that all played out. That was a very important aspect of my healing process.
Absolutely, absolutely. In the book, you describe life not as a straight path, but an interconnected design. How did that reshape your view of pain? Tell us a little bit about that perspective.
Well, I actually was able to embrace more of the pain as I went through this journey of healing. A lot of times people will pull away from the pain and they want the comfort first. With me, it was working through the pain that I actually was comforted, and that I had an understanding of what actually was experiencing at the time, which wasn't a bad thing. Although it sounded bad. Those situations in my life sounded pretty terrible and hard, and I wouldn't have wanted that for anybody else. But I actually felt that the healing that I experienced was, once it was addressed and once I faced it, it was completely gone from that moment on.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sure it was very cathartic, no doubt. What role did faith play in your life, particularly when you were going through those tough patches?
Oh, it had everything to do with it. I mean, I held on to the those kind of crumbs of life at some point in time, and continue to not want to give up. I had a true heart to see this thing through from beginning to end. While I was living with my parents, I had started writing. That was my life preserver through those years. I was writing Christian books. That was a book series.
Mm.
And those books catapulted me into actually wanting to write my testimony after the fact that I had written them. Um, but it was more of a inner working during those years, that I had to actually decide these things. I had to make choices, and I had to follow through with them.
Yeah, absolutely. The cover of your book is quite beautiful. Tell us a little bit about that artwork.
Actually, during the last 3 years of my parents' life, I had to involve a caregiver. Um, Also, she was a person that came in and was caring for them while I was working full time. And we connected after some time, and we became friends. And actually, in the book, I do express that my father had passed away first,
Mhm.
and my mother passed away second. But in the interim, her passing, we were invited into her home to have the full care that my mother needed, and that my father had asked me to see through
Mhm.
on this ordeal of their final moments in life. And she opened her doors to me and my mom, and the relationship began to become more of a friendship. And she actually was doing art at the time,
Mm.
and she actually painted the picture
Wow.
well in advance before I ever decided to write this book.
Wow.
So it drew me back into doing it, because I struggled with writing this book for 10 years. It
Mhm.
wasn't like I just decided in one day. It was just, eventually my heart had to just agree with doing it. And I was promised that if I did write this book, that my life would be healed. It wasn't a question of my wounds and all of the tragedy and trauma that I went through that would be healed, but that my life would be healed if I was to write this book. So
Mm.
this was a promise that was given to me, and that's why I followed through. And it holds a lot of meaning in terms of the beauty of who we are.
Mm.
Like, our authentic self is my authentic self is actually whole now and beautiful. And that was a portray of the years that I spent along the ocean shores, because that's where the healing actually took place for me. I went to churches and did all the spiritual things that we normally do, but my healing came through sitting at the edge of the water, in Clearwater Beach, actually. I spent years there where I wrote and where I cried and I spoke and I, did all the things that my soul needed to take place at the time. And that was really the healing for me.
Yeah.
And that's what the book cover actually resembles in that respect, that I was along the water and the sunshine. And those are the things that I held dear to my heart.
It's amazing because the book cover, the image is such a perfect fit. You would think it was written or created rather for the book, and it was created
Yeah.
first. So it's perfect. It's serendipitous. Sometimes it just works like that. Now I
Well,
understand.
yeah.
Exactly. Now I understand this is part one. Tell us about part two and so forth.
Well, part two is actually from me returning back to the condo. My parents uh, I had inherited their condo in the process of caring for them. And I was doing a complete remodel at the time before my mother's passing. And that's why we were invited to go stay with the home care person while that remodel was taking place. So from that book, it starts from me returning back to the condo after the remodel of everything. And I'm actually by myself for, I haven't been by myself in probably 40 years.
Right.
So it was just a settling moment. And I just began to write from that point on. And as I was, this wasn't at the time of agreeing to write the book, but I was led back to a church that I had visited 20 years earlier when I began to write my book series. And I was being led back to that church after 20 years. And that's when I began to write this book.
Wonderful.
And I was actually sharing all of my time there. I stayed there for 3 years, and I just have shared my experience and how God has brought me even further than where I was when I was just caring for my parents.
Yeah. Wonderful. It's an amazing part of your journey in that remodeling the condo in a way is sort of like rebooting your life, starting over.
Yes,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
exactly what the journey was from that point on, even at this church, because I met a lot of people. And I wrote the book while I was there. I wrote the book while I was, visiting that church. And I would go every Sunday to a bookstore, and I would spend the whole afternoon writing. And
Wonderful.
this just kind of evolved. And then situations kind of evolved at the same time, meeting people and people encouraging me to do what I was supposed to be doing, because I had kind of given up on the writing aspect at that point.
Tell us a little bit about your writing career.
Well, like I said, I've written a series of 12 books while I lived with my parents. It took me 12 years to write them. And it took me 8 years to give them out. I didn't ask for any money. I didn't have any platforms, didn't have any way of marketing them myself. So I chose to give them out as gifts. I gave them out to all kinds of people, every walk of life. And again, it took me 8 years to do that. So when I was done, I was retiring from being in retail for 20 years. And my parents had both of them had passed away. And I decided, well, I'm going to just put this stuff up on a shelf, and I'm not going to be bothered with writing anymore. I've had enough, with the healing process of writing those books. They healed my life. They healed me internally. So once I decided that, I was just retiring. I was playing golf and having fun and doing what I love to do. going to the beach and everything. And then it was like 4 years later that, like I said, I was led back to revisit this place. And that's when I took the journey to start writing this book.
Well, we're
And
glad you picked up your pen again. You were going to say, and
yeah,
what?
and it was just something that it was just truly a good beginning for me. It was the rebuilding of my life at that point. It was rebuilding my home, rebuilding myself, and doing the very thing that I knew all those years that I would write a best-selling novel, a best-selling book.
Mm-hmm.
And I held on to that through all those, trials and tribulations, especially with my parents. It was not easy,
Yeah.
caring for them and facing myself at the same time. So there was a lot of moments where I wanted to just, not continue to go forward in any capacity.
Well, we're glad you did continue to go forward. We're glad you did continue to write because this book is beautiful and inspiring. It is called To Touch One Heart. It is a courageous memoir about trauma, grief, faith, and most of all, healing, told through the powerful image of life as a tapestry. Pamela, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's been all mine. I appreciate your time, your insight, and the wonderful work you've done on this book. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time.